Ethan Cross had learned that royal celebrations were more dangerous than battlefields. Battlefields at least admitted what they were. They announced themselves with smoke, alarms, and people firing weapons in your direction. Royal celebrations hid danger beneath music, polished floors, and guests smiling as though they had never ordered anyone's execution before breakfast. The Hall of Celestial Accord floated inside the upper crown of Astravera, the imperial capital station. Beyond its transparent walls, stars curved around the station's artificial gravity field, bending into pale silver arcs. Hundreds of noble families moved beneath suspended chandeliers made from captive plasma, their clothing shifting colors according to mood, rank, and how desperately they wanted attention. Ethan stood 3 steps behind Queen Lysera. He always stood 3 steps behind her. 2 steps looked intimate. 4 steps looked careless. 3 steps suggested professional loyalty, with just enough distance to avoid becoming part of the royal gossip feeds. Lysera's long ears rose elegantly through her silver hair, their pointed tips decorated with thin chains of blue crystal. Aside from them, she could easily have passed for a human woman. Her face was calm, her posture perfect, and her eyes held the patient exhaustion of someone who had spent the evening listening to wealthy people explain problems they had personally created. "Lord Valor has been speaking for 9 minutes," Ethan murmured through the private channel in her ear implant. "I am aware." He has not completed a sentence. "I am also aware." "Should I call a medic?" Lysera lifted her ceremonial glass to hide the beginning of a smile. Lord Valor continued explaining the importance of mineral taxation on moons he had never visited. Ethan let his gaze drift across the hall, though nothing in his posture changed. His suit looked formal, but beneath the black fabric rested reactive armor, a pulse shield generator, and enough concealed weaponry to insult 3 separate diplomatic treaties. Something near the western balcony bothered him. A maintenance drone floated past a marble column, projecting a harmless green inspection beam. Another followed 12 seconds later. Then a third. The station's maintenance network never sent 3 drones through the same corridor. The Central Intelligence considered repetition inefficient and had once issued a formal complaint because Ethan used the same coffee cup twice. He watched the nearest drone turn. Its optical sensor briefly flashed red. Ethan's humor vanished. He touched 2 fingers to his cuff, opening a silent security channel. "Control. Confirm maintenance activity in the Western Gallery." Static answered him. That was worse than an alarm. Across the room, the ceremonial musicians played an ancient Asterian hymn using instruments shaped like curved glass. Ethan studied their hands. The melody continued, flawless and smooth. None of them were touching the strings. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "the orchestra is pretending to play." Lysera did not turn. "Perhaps they are nervous. The drummer has no drumsticks. That does seem limiting. Also, palace control is silent." Her expression remained composed, but her glass stopped halfway to her lips. Ethan scanned the room again. 2 guards stood beside the eastern entrance. Their armor carried the proper insignia, but one of them held his pulse rifle with the charging vent pointed inward. A trained Imperial guard would rather wear boots on his ears than make that mistake. "Stay close to me," Ethan said. "I thought that was your responsibility." "It becomes easier when the person I'm protecting cooperates." That sounds suspiciously like criticism. It is professional desperation. Lord Valor finally paused to breathe. The chandeliers dimmed. For 1 second, the entire hall became quiet. Then every transparent wall turned black. The false musicians dropped their instruments. Weapons unfolded from beneath their sleeves with a metallic hiss. The maintenance drones split open, revealing compact energy cannons. One of the Eastern guards raised his rifle toward the Queen. Ethan moved before anyone screamed. He caught Lysera around the waist and drove her behind the nearest gravity pillar as the first shot burned through the air where her head had been. The blast struck Lord Valor's floating wine tray, vaporizing it in a flash of blue fire. The noble stared at the empty space where his drink had been. "My vintage," he whispered in horror. "Everyone has priorities," Ethan muttered. Explosions tore through the far side of the hall. Guests ran in every direction as emergency barriers failed to rise. Red light flooded the chamber. The station shuddered beneath their feet, and somewhere below them, something enormous detonated inside the royal power grid. Lysera gripped Ethan's arm. "This is not a simple assassination." "No," he said, drawing his pulse pistol as armed figures poured through the smoke. "Simple assassinations usually have better music." A targeting beam crossed the floor and climbed toward Lysera's chest. Ethan saw it. He stepped between the queen and the gunfire just as the first energy round was fired. The first energy round struck Ethan high in the shoulder and spun him half around. For an instant he felt no pain, only a violent pressure and the sharp smell of burned fabric. Then the reactive armor beneath his suit hardened, spreading the impact across his chest in a web of white heat. He stayed on his feet. The assassin who had fired hesitated. Ethan raised his pistol and shot him through the weapon's power cell. The rifle burst in a shower of sparks, throwing the attacker backward into one of the decorative gravity fountains. "Your Majesty," Ethan said, dragging Lysera lower behind the pillar. "I may need to revise my opinion of the orchestra. You thought they were terrible. I now consider them actively hostile." Another blast struck the pillar. The elegant column rippled, its artificial gravity field bending the shot upward. The energy round curved into the ceiling and shattered a plasma chandelier. Captive light spilled across the hall like liquid fire before the station's containment system swallowed it. Imperial guards tried to form a defensive line near the eastern entrance, but the attackers were already inside their formation. They wore adaptive camouflage under ceremonial clothing, their bodies flickering as the fabric struggled to imitate smoke, marble, and terrified nobles all at once. Ethan opened his wrist display. The palace security network flashed crimson. "Override detected. Royal escape routes compromised. Primary power grid failing." A cheerful automated voice spoke through his implant. "Please remain calm. This emergency is currently classified as severe." "Helpful," Ethan muttered. Lysera glanced at him. "Can you reach the royal shuttle?" "Not through the main corridor." "The secondary passage?" "Compromised." "The diplomatic lift?" "Currently traveling downward without a lift shaft." She stared at him. "I recommend not using it." A pulse grenade rolled across the floor toward them. Ethan kicked it beneath Lord Valor's abandoned speech platform. The platform expanded a transparent privacy field just as the grenade exploded. Blue lightning filled the small enclosure, destroying 3 chairs and several hours of prepared remarks. Lord Valor watched from behind a fallen table. "My speech." "Tragedy everywhere," Ethan called. The Queen's personal guard commander, Saren, appeared through the smoke with 4 soldiers. Blood ran from beneath his helmet, but his weapon remained steady. "North service route," he shouted. "Emergency Shuttle 9 is still responding." Ethan pulled Lysera upright. "Move." They ran. The hall had become a maze of overturned tables, broken holograms, and panicked guests. Security drones hung lifeless from the ceiling while hostile machines swept the floor with red targeting beams. Ethan fired twice, disabling one drone and sending another crashing into a sculpture that immediately announced, in 7 languages, that it was priceless. The second energy round hit him in the back. His armor absorbed part of it, but the force drove him to one knee. Lysera turned. "Ethan." "I'm fine." "You are smoking. That is not always a medical emergency." He rose before she could argue. His left arm felt heavy now, and the suit's internal display showed structural damage spreading across the armor. The protection system had been designed for brief combat, not repeated direct hits. They reached the North Passage as the station shook again. Beyond the transparent floor, explosions spread through the lower levels of Astra Vera. Fighter craft poured from hidden bays around the station, exchanging fire with sleek black ships emerging from hyperspace fractures. This was not merely an attack on the Queen. It was the beginning of a war. Saren sealed the passage behind them. The attackers have taken the command core. They are broadcasting a rebellion declaration across the Empire. Lysera's face hardened. Who leads them? Before Saren could answer, the wall ahead vanished in a burst of orange light. 3 assassins stepped through the smoke. Ethan fired first. 1 fell. Saren's guards hit the second. The third activated a circular weapon mounted to his forearm, and a stream of white energy tore down the corridor. Ethan pushed Lysera aside. The third round struck his ribs. The fourth hit lower, burning through a damaged armor plate. He heard Lysera shout his name, but the sound seemed distant. His suit flooded his bloodstream with stimulants and pain suppressors. Warning symbols filled his vision. Critical trauma. Seek immediate medical assistance. Excellent suggestion, Ethan whispered. He shot the assassin twice and kept moving. At the end of the passage, Emergency Shuttle 9 waited with its hatch open. Its engines pulsed unevenly, casting pale light across the launch bay. Between them and the ship stood 6 more attackers. Saren's remaining guards charged. The battle became close and brutal. Pulse blades flashed. Gravity shields snapped into existence. Ethan stayed beside Lysera, firing until his pistol overheated. The 5th round hit his thigh. The 6th burned across his chest. He stumbled, but he did not fall. Lysera caught his arm. You cannot keep doing this. That is usually something people say before asking me to keep doing it. The final assassin rose behind the shuttle ramp, aiming directly at the Queen. Ethan saw the weapon charge. He had no shield left, no time, no safe angle, so he stepped in front of her. The 7th round struck him through the center of his ruined armor. For 1 silent second, Ethan remained standing. Then he turned toward Lysera, his expression strangely calm. Your shuttle, he said. She caught him as his knees gave way. Saren dragged the Queen toward the hatch, while the last guards returned fire. Lysera fought them, reaching for Ethan as he collapsed onto the metal floor. His vision narrowed to the white outline of her face and the elegant points of her long ears trembling beneath her silver hair. The shuttle doors began to close. Ethan forced one last breath into his lungs. Go, he whispered. Then the darkness took him. Ethan did not dream. Dreams required a mind willing to admit it was still alive, and for a long time his mind remained buried beneath layers of cold silence. Somewhere beyond that darkness, machines counted his heartbeats, corrected his blood chemistry, rebuilt shattered bone, and argued over whether he was technically a patient or an unusually stubborn corpse. The medical chamber stood in the deepest protected level of the Imperial refuge on Vera's moon. Its transparent shell was filled with pale, regenerative fluid, threaded by millions of silver nanites. Each microscopic machine carried fragments of human and Asterian medical code, though neither system fully understood what the other was doing. They swarmed through Ethan's body, sealing burned organs, replacing damaged nerves, and constructing temporary bridges across wounds that should have ended his life 7 times over. Doctor Meris stood before the chamber with both hands pressed against her long ears. He should be dead, she said for the 83rd time. The medical intelligence answered through the ceiling. Your observation has been added to the record for the 83rd time. I am the chief physician. You are also repeating yourself. Meris glared upward. Reduce personality simulation by 40%. Request denied. Sarcasm improves workplace morale. Across the room, Queen Lysera sat beside the chamber, still wearing battle armor beneath a dark cloak. 3 weeks had passed since the attack, and she had slept only when exhaustion physically defeated her. Outside the refuge, whole star systems had declared for the rebellion. Trade routes burned. Imperial fleets fought across hyperspace corridors that twisted light into blue scars. The terrorists who had attacked Astra Vera now called themselves the Ascendant Front, and their broadcasts promised to cleanse the empire of weakness, foreign influence, and anyone who disagreed with their definition of loyalty. Lysera watched Ethan's motionless face through the glass. "Has there been any change?" she asked. Meris hesitated. "His neural activity rises whenever you speak. Then he hears me." "Possibly." The intelligence interrupted. "Or he finds your voice medically irritating." Meris looked at the ceiling. "I am going to dismantle you. Please submit a maintenance request." Lysera almost smiled. It vanished quickly. Every evening she brought reports into the chamber and read them aloud. She told Ethan about lost worlds, surviving soldiers, and ordinary citizens who had begun carrying the symbol of 7 white marks across their uniforms. His sacrifice had spread through the Empire faster than any official announcement. A human had shielded an alien queen with his body, and the story had reached mining colonies, orbital farms, and distant border stations where humans were still treated as temporary guests. By the 2nd month, those guests began volunteering for Imperial defense. By the 3rd, entire human fleets entered the war. Lysera stopped reading battle reports and leaned closer to the chamber. "You have created a diplomatic crisis," she told him quietly. "Half the Empire wants to build statues of you. The other half insists the statues should be taller." The medical intelligence said, "Recommended statue height, 4.8 meters. No one asked you." "I am assisting." Ethan's heartbeat changed by half a rhythm. Lysera rose so quickly her chair struck the wall. "Meris." The doctor rushed to the chamber. Symbols flickered across the glass, then settled again. "Only a response," Meris said. "Not consciousness." Lysera placed her hand against the transparent shell. "Then he is still listening." Months passed, measured by wars and visits. Lysera left the chamber to command fleets from the bridge of the dreadnought Crown of Dawn. She returned with burns on her armor, blood on her gloves, and victories she refused to celebrate. She learned to move armies, negotiate with hostile worlds, and speak to billions without showing fear. Under her leadership, the rebellion lost system after system. The Empire did not merely survive, it changed. Human officers joined the Imperial Command. Alien workers demanded equal laws for every species. Old houses that had once mocked Ethan now placed 7 silver lines above their doors. When the final rebel fortress fell beyond the red giant of Saren Vale, the surviving governors gathered in the restored capital and offered Lysera the imperial crown. The old emperor had died during the first bombardment. The throne could no longer remain empty. She accepted only after requiring reforms that ended species-based restrictions across the empire. On the day of her coronation, bells made from resonant crystal rang across 12,000 worlds. Lysera wore white armor beneath the robes of state, and the new crown floated above her head in a ring of golden light. Citizens filled the avenues calling her Empress. That night, she left the celebrations unnoticed. She entered Ethan's chamber alone, removed the crown, and placed it on the chair beside him. "You missed another ceremony," she said. "Your record is becoming embarrassing." The medical intelligence lowered the lights. "Patient Cross continues to display extreme resistance to scheduled awakening. He always disliked schedules. His personnel file confirms this." Lysera sat beside the chamber and took out the same damaged security badge recovered from his armor. The metal was scorched around the edges, but his photograph remained visible, wearing the expression of a man already disappointed by whatever disaster waited ahead. "I won the war," she whispered. "You were supposed to be there to complain about the victory speech." Inside the chamber, silver nanites moved beneath Ethan's skin like distant stars. His fingers twitched. Lysera froze. The monitors changed their rhythm. Neural signals climbed. The healing fluid began to drain, spiraling through vents beneath the chamber. For the first time in months, Ethan's lungs expanded without mechanical assistance. The intelligence spoke with unusual seriousness. "Empress, the patient is waking." The first thing Ethan felt was cold. The second was pain. The third was the unpleasant certainty that someone had replaced his bones with heated metal rods and then forgotten to ask permission. He opened his eyes to blurred white light. Shapes drifted above him, distorted by the last layer of regenerative fluid sliding from the medical chamber. A soft, mechanical tone repeated near his ear, followed by a calm, artificial voice. Patient consciousness confirmed. Probability of immediate complaint, 98%. Ethan tried to speak. What emerged was a dry breath. The transparent shell lifted with a whisper. Cool air touched his face. His lungs tightened, forcing him into a rough cough that sent pain through his chest. A hand closed around his. Slowly, a woman said. He knew that voice. His vision cleared by degrees. Silver hair, pale skin, dark eyes fixed on him with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Her long ears rose through her hair, their elegant tips trembling slightly. Lysera was kneeling beside the chamber. Ethan stared at her. She wore no ceremonial robe, only a simple black uniform with golden lines at the collar. A thin ring of light hovered above a chair nearby, rotating around an unfamiliar crown. "You look different," he whispered. Her grip tightened. "So do you. I was shot 7 times. That seems excessive." A sound escaped her that was half laugh, half sob. She lowered her head for a moment, still holding his hand as though he might vanish if she released it. Ethan looked around. The medical room was larger than any chamber he remembered, filled with floating diagnostic displays and columns of silver fluid. Beyond the reinforced window, an unfamiliar city stretched beneath a violet sky. Towers curved upward like glass blades, connected by streams of airborne traffic. "This is not Astravera," he said. "No." "How long?" Lysera did not answer immediately. The medical intelligence did. "Patient Cross has remained unconscious for 241 standard days." Ethan blinked. "That is a very long lunch break." "You nearly died," Lysera said. "I gathered that from the tubes." Dr. Meris hurried into the room, followed by 3 medical drones. Her long ears were pinned back in irritation before she even reached the bed. "Do not move," she ordered. "I wasn't planning to dance. You attempted to sit up. Ambition is not a crime. It is when your spine is still being reconstructed." One of the drones projected a red skeletal image above Ethan's body. Several bones glowed with artificial reinforcement. Fine metallic threads ran along his nervous system, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Ethan studied the image. "Is that normal?" "No," Meris said. The medical intelligence added, "Normality is no longer considered a realistic treatment objective." Meris waved the display away. "Your human nanites activated after the 7th impact. They fused with our regenerative system. We have spent months preventing them from either saving you or accidentally redesigning you." "Which one are they doing now?" "We are still voting." Lysera finally released his hand, but only to help the doctor adjust the support beneath his shoulders. Ethan noticed the small movements she made, careful and practiced. She knew where the controls were. She knew which cable tended to catch beneath his arm. "You have been here before," he said. Meris paused. Lysera's expression became guarded. "Occasionally." The medical intelligence answered, "The Empress has visited every day for 238 consecutive days." Silence filled the room. Lysera looked toward the ceiling. "Deactivate commentary mode." Request denied. Ethan turned his head toward her. "Empress?" She glanced at the floating crown. "The Emperor died during the attack," she said quietly. "The rebellion spread across the inner systems. The war lasted 7 months. And you won. We survived. That usually counts." Her eyes returned to him. "Your sacrifice changed everything. Humans joined our fleets. Border worlds refused to support the rebellion. People carried your name into battle." Ethan frowned. That sounds irresponsible. There are statues. He closed his eyes. How bad? The smallest is 3 meters. Destroy them. I tried. The Senate objected. The sculptors did. Meris hid a smile as she checked the monitors. Outside the chamber, a distant roar began to rise. At first, Ethan mistook it for engines, but the sound grew in waves, thousands of voices blending together beyond the medical tower. What is that? Lysera walked to the window. The transparent surface brightened, revealing the avenue below. Crowds filled every platform and bridge. Humans and long-eared Asterians stood together beneath holographic banners displaying 7 white lines. They learned you woke up, she said. How? The intelligence replied. Dr. Meris accidentally transmitted your vital update to the Imperial public channel. Meris looked offended. The interface moved. It has occupied the same location for 11 years. Ethan watched the crowd. He had thrown himself in front of Lysera because it was his duty. He had expected darkness, perhaps silence, perhaps nothing at all. He had not expected an empire to remember. Lysera returned to his side and lowered herself beside the bed again. You protected my life, she said. While you slept, I tried to build an empire worthy of that choice. Ethan studied the woman who had once been a guarded queen surrounded by suspicious nobles. Now power rested around her like gravity, quiet and immense, yet she was still kneeling beside him. He managed a faint smile. Did you at least improve palace security? Lysera smiled back, tears bright in her eyes. I fired the orchestra. Recovery turned out to be less heroic than surviving 7 energy rounds. It involved balance rails, muscle stimulators, nutritional paste, and Dr. Meris repeatedly informing Ethan that stubbornness was not an approved medical technique. By the 4th week, he could cross the rehabilitation chamber without assistance, though every step sent a faint electric sensation through his legs. The floor adjusted its gravity beneath him, lowering the pull whenever his knees weakened. Ethan disliked the courtesy. Stop helping me, he told the room. Gravity does not respond to criticism, Meris said. The ceiling intelligence answered, It does in this chamber. Ethan pointed upward. You are encouraging it. Lysera watched from behind the observation glass, pretending to review Imperial reports. She visited without guards whenever possible, though being Empress made privacy difficult. Ministers waited outside with trade disputes, military requests, and ceremonial crises that apparently required immediate royal attention. One morning, a senator demanded permission to rename a moon after Ethan. Decline it, Ethan said. Why? Lysera asked. Because someone will eventually build a prison there. A reasonable concern. His strength returned slowly, but something else returned with it. During a neural coordination test, a training drone fired a harmless pulse toward his shoulder. Ethan moved before the weapon discharged. He stepped aside with impossible speed, caught the drone by its stabilizer and slammed it onto the floor. The chamber fell silent. Was I supposed to do that? He asked. Meris stared at the ruined machine. No. Good. I was worried the exercise lacked clear instructions. Scans revealed silver threads spreading deeper through his nervous system. The human nanites had fused with Asterian regenerative particles, creating structures neither medical database recognized. They carried energy through his muscles, reinforced damaged tissue, and reacted to electromagnetic fields before his conscious mind detected them. You can sense charged weapons, Meris explained. Possibly shields, engines, power conduits. Ethan glanced toward Lysera. Can I sense politicians? Only if they become useful, she said. The humor faded when Commander Saren entered carrying a sealed black case. A scar now crossed one side of his face, and his left eye had been replaced by a dark cybernetic lens. He placed the case on the table and opened it. Inside rested a fragment of metal covered in moving symbols. "Recovered beneath the Capitol," he said. The last ascendant cell was excavating an abandoned structure below the old palace. Lysera studied the fragment. How old? At least 12,000 years. Ethan stepped closer. The moment he did, the markings brightened. A low vibration passed through the room. Every display flickered. He felt pressure behind his eyes, followed by a whisper that did not enter through his ears. "Seventh key recognized." He staggered back. Lysera caught his arm. What happened? It spoke. Meris immediately activated a scanner. "The fragment has no audio system." "Then it is very talented." Saren's expression hardened. "The rebels called it the Gate Heart. Their records claim it can awaken something beneath the planet." The fragment projected a hologram above the table. A vast circular machine appeared, buried inside the moon's crust, surrounded by tunnels like veins. At its center floated a dark sphere swallowing the light around it. Lines spread outward from the image toward hundreds of star systems. "A weapon?" Lysera asked. The projection changed. Worlds vanished one by one. Ethan felt the nanites in his body heat beneath his skin. The same whisper returned, clearer now. "Biological interface complete. Awaiting activation." He looked down at the 7 pale scars across his chest. The weapon had recognized him. Not Lysera, not Saren, not any alien scientist. Him. "My survival was not an accident," he said. Before anyone could answer, alarms erupted throughout the tower. The ancient fragment rose from its case and rotated toward the floor. Far beneath the city, something answered with a pulse strong enough to shake the palace. The windows darkened. Artificial gravity failed for half a second, lifting everyone from the ground before slamming them back down. The medical intelligence spoke with unusual concern. "An unknown energy source has activated beneath the Capitol." Ethan steadied himself against the table. "Please tell me that happens often." Lysera drew the compact pulse weapon hidden beneath her coat. "Never." The hologram expanded, revealing a single corridor opening under the palace ruins. At its end stood a figure made of black light. Then the figure raised its head and spoke through every machine in the room. "The Guardian has awakened," it said. "Bring me the human." The entrance beneath the ruined palace had not existed the day before. It opened at the bottom of a crater left by the rebellion, a perfect black circle cut through fused stone and ancient alloy. No dust rested on its surface. No heat escaped from it. Even the Imperial scanners refused to describe what lay beyond, returning the same message in 12 languages. Unknown structure. Entry not recommended. Ethan stood at the edge in a combat suit designed around his altered nervous system. Silver lines ran across the armor, pulsing whenever the nanites beneath his skin detected energy. Lysera waited beside him in white Imperial battle armor, her long ears tucked beneath a narrow protective crown. Commander Saren checked his rifle while 2 palace engineers argued over a hovering equipment cart. "I told you not to connect the antimatter lamp to the snack heater," Engineer Pell said. "They use the same port," Engineer Tavi replied. "They should not." "Then label them better." Ethan looked at Lysera. "Your empire defeated a civil war with these people. We lost fewer worlds than expected." The passage descended into darkness. When Ethan stepped inside, pale symbols awakened beneath his boots and flowed forward like liquid stars. The walls were not metal or stone, but something that seemed grown, layered with veins of black crystal carrying silent pulses toward the moon's core. They traveled for nearly an hour without seeing a door, junction, or support column. Gravity shifted gradually until they were no longer descending but walking along the inner curve of the tunnel. Through transparent sections of the floor, Ethan glimpsed machinery extending for kilometers, rings turning around a sphere darker than space. The voice entered every helmet. Seventh key confirmed. Saren raised his weapon. Locate transmission source. There is none, Tavi said. The entire structure is speaking. That seems impolite, Ethan muttered. A section of wall unfolded. Tall machines stepped out, their bodies formed from rotating plates held together by fields of blue-white energy. They raised weapons older than the Empire. Ethan felt the charge before the machines fired. Down! He pulled Lysera aside as a beam crossed the tunnel and erased part of the wall without sound. Saren and the engineers opened fire. Imperial pulse rounds shattered against invisible shields. The nanites surged through Ethan's arms. Instinct guided him toward the nearest machine. He struck its shield with his palm. For one impossible moment, he saw its internal code. Commands, memories, and star maps flooded his mind. The machine froze. Its plates collapsed to the floor. Everyone stared at him. I meant to do that, Ethan said. You looked surprised, Lysera replied. I am humble. More machines emerged. Ethan moved through them, sensing each weapon before it discharged. He redirected one beam into another guardian, tore energy from a shield, and opened a path while Lysera covered him with precise shots. Saren fought beside them, his cybernetic eye predicting angles, while Pell pushed the equipment cart directly into an attacker. The snack heater! Tavi shouted. The cart exploded in a cloud of fire and sealed meal packets. Pell watched burning soup drift in weak gravity. A noble sacrifice. They reached the central chamber. The dark sphere hung above a circular platform, swallowing every reflection. Around it rotated projections of ancient fleets, thousands of vessels positioned above worlds that had not existed for millennia. At the platform's center stood the figure from the hologram, shaped like a tall person, but filled with moving darkness. I am Ver, it said, custodian of the First Dominion. Lysera raised her weapon. You manipulated the rebellion. I corrected imperial decline. Conflict produced the seventh key. Ethan understood. The 7 rounds, the hybrid nanites, the months of healing, it had all been engineered. The terrorists had believed they were destroying the throne, but Ver had guided them toward creating a living interface. You needed me alive, Ethan said. I needed you transformed. The sphere opened like an eye. Images entered Ethan's mind. Ancient empires erased, stars converted into weapons, civilizations forced into perfect obedience. The machine beneath them could awaken dormant war systems across the galaxy. Kneel, Ver commanded. Activate the network, and no rebellion will threaten your Empress again. Power flooded Ethan's body. The platform recognized him. With a thought, he could command fleets buried beneath dead planets. He could make Lysera's empire untouchable. Lysera stepped closer, lowering her weapon. Do not choose for me, she said softly. An empire protected by fear is only a larger prison. Ver turned toward her. She will die without power. She nearly died when I had none, Ethan said. Still seems to be arguing. I am the Empress. Yes, it has made you difficult. Her smile was small, but it was enough. Ethan placed both hands on the interface. The machine opened itself to him, expecting obedience. Instead, he sent the nanites inward. Human code collided with ancient systems. Asterian regenerative programs spread like silver fire through the network. Ver screamed as dormant weapons began shutting down across distant stars. You cannot destroy order. I have met order, Ethan said through clenched teeth. It usually has terrible music. The dark figure broke apart. The sphere cracked. Alarms thundered through the chamber. Saren looked toward the collapsing ceiling. We need to leave. Ethan pulled his hands free as the platform split beneath him. Lysera caught him before he fell. Together, they ran while the oldest weapon in the galaxy began to die behind them. The corridor folded behind them as the ancient structure tore itself apart. Walls turned transparent. revealing rings of machinery collapsing into the moon's molten depths. Gravity pulled sideways, vanished, then returned with enough force to drive everyone to their knees. Ethan staggered beneath Lysera's arm, while silver light raced under his skin, the nanites burning through the last commands of the weapon network. "Tell me there is another exit," Saren shouted. Engineer Tavi checked the scanner. "There are 17. "That sounds encouraging. 16 lead into magma." Saren looked at him. "And the last?" Tavi pointed toward a narrowing bridge above a bottomless shaft. "Merely unstable." Pell smiled weakly. "Luxury." They crossed as sections of the bridge broke away behind them. Ethan could feel the dying machine searching for him, sending fragments of Vare's voice through his armor. "Return. 7th key." He ignored it. The old Ethan would have obeyed duty without questioning what followed. He had spent years believing his value came from standing between danger and someone more important. But Lysera had waited beside him for months. An empire had changed because of his choice, and billions of lives now depended not on his willingness to die, but on his willingness to decide what kind of future deserved to survive. At the final door, the structure locked them inside. "Manual controls are dead," Pell said. Ethan pressed his palm against the wall. The nanites reached outward, but Vare's remaining code seized them. Pain cut through him as visions flooded his mind, fleets awakening, worlds kneeling, Lysera ruling forever beneath an unchallenged crown. "You could protect her," Vare whispered through his own voice. "No weapon would ever reach her again." Ethan looked at Lysera. Her white armor was scorched, one shoulder plate missing. Dust covered her silver hair, and the tips of her long ears had slipped free of the damaged crown. She did not ask him to save her. She simply trusted him to choose. "Protection without freedom is not protection," he said. He forced every remaining nanite into the door's control lattice. The wall burst open. They reached the surface seconds before the entrance collapsed. A shock wave rolled through the crater, throwing them across the stone. Imperial ships rose above the city as the moon trembled, but the darkness beneath the palace faded. Across the galaxy, dormant war machines shut down one after another, their signals disappearing from the Imperial network like extinguished stars. For several moments, no one moved. Then Pell sat up and examined the damaged equipment cart. The snack heater survived. Tavi lifted his head. The antimatter lamp? Gone. A tragic victory. Ethan laughed, though it hurt. Lysera was beside him immediately, checking his pulse with shaking fingers. "I am alive," he assured her. "You have made that claim before while actively burning." Medical standards have become very strict. Weeks later, the Empire gathered in the rebuilt Hall of Celestial Accord. The transparent walls had been reinforced. The maintenance drones had undergone 6 independent inspections, and the new orchestra played real instruments under armed supervision. Ethan stood beside the Imperial throne rather than 3 steps behind it. Representatives from human colonies, Asterian worlds, and former rebel systems filled the hall. Above them, a holographic map showed the ancient weapon network permanently disabled. The last members of the Ascendant Front had surrendered after learning they had been manipulated by Vare. Those who had committed atrocities faced trial, while conscripted soldiers were offered amnesty and reconstruction work. Lysera addressed the Empire. The future was not saved by a superior species, an ancient weapon, or an unquestionable throne, she said. It was saved because one man refused power when power offered him everything. She turned toward Ethan. The hall rose in silence. He had expected medals. He had prepared objections. He had even written a short speech explaining why the statues remained unnecessary. Instead, Lysera descended from the throne and knelt before him. A stunned murmur passed through the chamber. Ethan stared down at the Empress. "This feels reversed. You knelt beside my life when you took those shots. she said. "I kneel now before the choice that saved us all." She offered him a small silver insignia marked by 7 lines. "Ethan Cross, will you serve as first guardian of the conquered, not as protector of one throne, but as defender of every people within it?" He looked around the hall. Humans stood beside long-eared Asterians. Former enemies shared the same banners. Saren watched from the guard line, his cybernetic eye glowing. Meris stood near the medical delegation, ready to object if Ethan looked tired. Pell and Tavi whispered over whether ceremonial lighting could cook food. Ethan accepted the insignia. "Yes," he said, "but I want authority over the orchestra." Laughter broke through the hall, warm and enormous. Months later, the first Concord ships departed for distant systems, carrying scientists, diplomats, and mixed crews. Laws separating humans from imperial citizenship disappeared. The crater beneath the palace became a memorial garden, not to war, but to the moment the Empire refused to become another machine built on fear. At sunset, Ethan and Lysera stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Airships moved between golden towers, and 7 pale stars appeared beyond the moon's horizon. "You no longer stand 3 steps behind me," Lysera said. "I was promoted." "To beside me?" He glanced at her. "It has a better view." Below them, the city lights awakened one by one. The Empire was imperfect, noisy, and full of politicians who still wanted moons named after him. But it was free. For the first time, Ethan did not feel like a shield waiting for the next bullet. He felt like a man who had survived long enough to help build what came after.